Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined by my co-host, as always, Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, the last basically week and a half of Arizona athletics has been quite the whirlwind. We've had a couple basketball games that we'll get into this past week, but we've had a couple key things happen in the football side of things, and the most important thing was last night, as we're recording this, President Robert Robbins fired athletic director Dave Keke after a little over a 7-year term at Arizona. This is after Arizona has had an ongoing 200 plus million financial crisis, as they labeled it. How are you doing today? And what are your first thoughts about all of this crazy stuff happening?
I'm doing great today. But made it back home, Louisiana. Weather cleared out. Hope everybody's staying safe and the roads are cleared out everywhere. Um, but yeah, it's been a whirlwind of a week and a half. And I know last week we were talking about whether even to bring up really much of the case with the football team. And so
It's good we waited.
um, yeah, it's great we waited. And I think probably my opinions have even changed a little bit more about it, especially some of the things that have come out. I've never been a huge fan of Hiki and some of the decisions he's made. But especially over the last like 24 hours, there's just been a huge amount of like praise about how good of a dude he is. So I feel bad that a good guy lost a job. But
100%.
for what we should be getting in the next day or so from the overspending that was happening in the athletic department, probably reason enough somewhat to fire him, but also like the president is signing off on all these things. And so I think the greatest saying, like we've talked about the Roman Empire so much in the last few months, like all roads lead back to Rome. All these roads are going to lead back to President Robbins,
100%.
and he's just like kind of delaying the inevitable. And in December, when they announced of the huge deficit of the over projections that was occurring, at my phone was getting blown up from people I know down here in Louisiana, like, what's going on with your school? Like, they're going to close up all their athletic departments. So it's been really shocking, I think. So, and even the person that was responsible is still employed with the university. She just got moved to like a different position. So I think that's a part that's really interesting. You're firing Hiki because of this, and you're letting like a person that was in charge of that led to this huge amount of deficit and over projections still keep a job at the university. Um, but yeah, those are some of my thoughts about it, and it's going to lead back to Robbins. I saw yesterday in an article from, I think it was KOLD. They're talking about how one of the board of trustees was already putting in a vote of no confidence for Robbins, and that was before he got fired. So he's just making him a scapegoat. I tweeted that yesterday, and that's kind of all this is kind of pointing out to me. What did you think about a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, I totally agree with a lot of what you just said. And just the timeline of the events just doesn't make any sense because I'll go through the timeline. January 14th is when Jed Fish was quickly hired at Washington. The 16th, just 48 hours later, less than, Arizona and Dave Heeke in particular, it seems as if he hired Brent Brennan. And then last night on the 22nd, at the end of the workday, it was revealed that Robbins fired Heeke. So it just doesn't make sense to me that Robbins would put the trust in the hands of the guy that he's about to fire to hire the team's and your university's head football coach. I know it seems like Robbins and everyone unanimously pretty much love Brett Brennan and that it is a great hire. This is his dream job. He's a guy that everyone in house knows and loves. So I don't think it would have changed that. But yeah, I totally agree that it does seem as if Robbins is making Hickey the scapegoat, because I read those and heard those same things about the board already voting or talking about getting Robbins out. And that just makes it seem that he was being put under a lot of pressure and he thought, yeah, let me just get rid of the athletic director, even though a key part of the information that you said about the key person and the important person that was handling like this error and with the $200 million that has gone missing at Arizona, and that person stays employed. So yeah, it seems like it's just a common thing in sports. In other sports, an owner will fire the GM or the
Mhm.
GM will fire the coach before they get fired. So that's what this seems like. But yeah, my first thought was that Robbins is going to be gone very soon. And I don't know how soon, but I think people are going to start to question his him doing this after him hiring a football coach, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. Flat out, this is just an embarrassment for Arizona fans, and everyone involved in this program.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I think one element, the basketball element, I think I can throw in there is over the last like 4 to 5 years, Heek has made hirings for a new softball coach, a new baseball coach, a new basketball coach, and two new football coaches. The basketball coach, Tommy Lloyd, was pretty much the only one of the only non-Arizona related people that he made a hire. So far, that's been the best hire that's been made that hasn't really been affected by either Robbins or he hasn't been an alumni or played. That's been a home run hire so far. So Tommy Lloyd, the baseball coach, used to play at Arizona. The softball coach used to play at Arizona. Jed Fish, actually, Hickey didn't even hire Fish. He was Robbins's guy because Robbins did heart surgery on him in the early 2000s, so they had a close relationship. So that was
Mhm.
Robbins' hire technically.
Yep.
And the one hire that I would say outside of Tommy Lloyd is Kevin Sumlin that Dave Hickey has made over the last 4 or 5 years.
And that
And
was that was the biggest disaster. And Jordan, you
yes,
just you just mentioned Tommy Lloyd. I did read something that was pretty interesting, is that he was supposed to get the board was supposed to approve a new 2-year extension for him for Tommy
yes,
Lloyd, and then it got removed. So for the upcoming Board of Regents meeting. So it's just all very crazy, and I really hope they get their stuff together in the
agreed.
athletic department and the higher ups at the university, because they cannot afford to lose Tommy Lloyd. Tommy Lloyd, you don't know what he's thinking. He could think this is a disaster. I want out. You never know. Even
Very
though
true.
the basketball program is in a great spot, in the best spot it's been in years since earlier Sean Miller years. So yeah, I don't think this immediately affects the basketball program, as Lloyd, believe, is still under contract for at least 2 more years, as we know in this
I
coaching
believe
world.
2 to 3.
Yeah. So yeah, this was going to be another. So he sticks around for or under contract for about 5 more years. But yeah, I think this is concerning, not just for football, as it directly impacts that, as they recently hired their coach, but I think this impacts everything, including basketball,
Definitely.
because basketball is the biggest moneymaker, the biggest, show on campus. It's the biggest thing for them. And yeah, they need to take resources away from places, and I don't think it'll be basketball, but I really, I'm lost, and I don't have really any words or just anything to predict that goes by this athletic department in the near future.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the more we're talking about it just makes the position that the university is in the athletic department even more scarier, I think, because and I'm really happy with the interim they picked, Coach Candrea. He was
Yep.
coach of the softball team for almost 3 decades, won multiple national championships. There's not another person that knows more about Arizona athletics than him. So that's a great person to step in immediately in the interim role. And I agree with you. They need to get rid of Robbins because with even an athletic director hiring, I know it's been reported that Baylor's athletic director, who is an Arizona grad, and is like a people consider him like a top 15 AD in the country. He's kind of already being leaked to the job, and that would be a home run hire. Why would you step into what's going on at the University of Arizona with
Yeah,
Robbins
and
and with
Jordan,
what's going on?
the other
It's going to
point,
scare people away.
yeah, and the other point is, as I heard someone say it, but the money aspect, that's the big major
Yes,
issue, and that issue is going to take into effect the next athletic director. Is Arizona going
completely.
to have? It was top athletic directors, I believe, make like over 1 million, or or top ones around the country. I don't know how much the guy from Baylor will demand, but it doesn't seem like it seems like Arizona could go in house for this one. And then, you know, I don't know how great that is because, it's the same regime, that's why this whole thing doesn't make any sense. You're taking out the number one guy in the department, the athletic director, former athletic director Hickey, but then the other people are still remain in place. You still have Robbins there, who Robbins, as you mentioned, for the hiring of Fish, he was calling the shots then. So he really, obviously, he's the president. And to me, this should all fall on him, and he should have been the first one to fall. But as I
I agree.
mentioned, that's not really how it works in sports.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially with Arizona going now into the Big 12, even just travel costs alone are going to skyrocket. So I'm really scared to see what could possibly happen in the athletic department, and on top of this, like they just need leadership right now. And over the last 24 hours, we've seen scapegoating from a coward that hasn't come out at any point over the last week and a half when we lost our football coach. I know he had COVID. How hard is it to make a quick video on your phone? How hard is that? He's being a coward right now. And
Yeah, I
and
I
and
totally
I,
agree.
and I don't
100%.
want to I don't want to throw that word around lightly, but that's what he's been, and to be honest, he's been that. Like the fact that the athletic department in the university has lost this amount of money, and he's taken a literal raise and a bonus every single year, even during COVID. That's insane to think about. And while he's doing this, he's telling the student body and future students, as of 2025, guaranteed tuition is not going to be a thing. And for people that don't know what that means, basically when you're a freshman, you get a certain number of tuition, like I think just a random number, like $8,000 tuition per semester. That's not going to change through 4 years. So now they're getting rid of that because tuition raises with every single new class. And so now students are going to be protected for 4 years. Their tuition is going to increase every single time while the president is getting bonuses and raises. Make it make sense.
Yeah,
Make
no,
it
that
make sense.
it doesn't make any sense at all to me. And yeah, it was that I didn't see that he had COVID. Maybe that is true. I just thought he was sick, but it is kind of weird that he was absent. It seems like a lot on it during the hiring process of
Definitely.
Brennan. It's just all kind of bizarre. It's just so weird. And Brennan, for a guy that did take his quote unquote dream job,
Mm-hmm.
his head's probably spinning at this because it's the guy that just hired me less than a week ago is the guy who just got fired. So how does that make sense? Hickey's the guy that went to San Jose to pick up Brent Brennan and bring him back to Arizona. That doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make any sense. It doesn't make any
Doesn't.
sense. Do you have any other final? I think we've touched and hit upon the major factors and
Yeah.
key points here. Do you have any other things you want to, quickly hit before we move on?
The university needs leadership. The athletic department needs leadership. I think Coach Candrea is going to be a huge help for the athletic department. But overall, the university needs a leader. And at this point, I feel like it's obvious that that leader is not President Robbins.
Yeah, well, that was well said. And Jordan, the football program, new changes, the future's unknown. The athletic department is the future there is unknown. But the one thing that is known is that the Arizona Wildcats, the men's basketball team, got back on track. 2 wins like we predicted against the California schools. They moved up from 12th in the country to number 9. Their two wins were different. The one against USC, 15-point win. They got back on track. They were shooting it better, and then they were actually trailing UCLA by 17, nearly 20 points, which I chalked that up as a loss midway through that game. I thought I wasn't confident they were going to come back, but starting with the USC game, this was uh earlier that last week, and the guards just played a lot better. Love had 20.
Mhm.
Larson had 13. Boswell got back on track. He had 11 points. Still, they didn't shoot it great. Boswell only 4 for 12, but 40 over 40% or 40% exactly from the field, and a bad average at 38.5% from deep. So we saw some improvement, not necessarily all the way back performance from Arizona. But what were your takeaways from this game against USC?
Yeah, I think that specific game is apparent with a lot of these Pac-12 games. It's hard to pull a lot out for Arizona, especially with how many injuries USC has. They should be a lot better than they are, but when you can't get guys on the court, that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But Arizona played well. They didn't they didn't play to their highest peak, but they haven't played as bad as we have seen them, especially on the road over the last few weeks.
Yeah, I agree.
But
And,
yeah,
and USC, as you mentioned, they've had tons of injuries. They weren't just missing any guys; they were missing their two
definitely.
lead guards.
Yes.
Isaiah Collier's, to me, going to be a top 3 pick in the NBA draft, and Boogie Ellis, who's been one of the best guards in the Pac-12, seems like the last about 3 years plus. So when you're missing those guys, it's hard to compete. Bronny James looked good in spurts. He's still working his way back into full form. But yeah, I think Arizona's guards did look good. I was really impressed by Jaden Bradley. 10 points, 5 steals off the bench, and his impact and just the heart that he plays with and his want to win, his will is just it's unmatched almost. He's just so aggressive out there. And it seems like every minute he's out there, he wants to earn more. And that's what you want to see from a young player, from a guy off the bench that's trying to mold a role for himself. So yeah, I thought he was great. Did anyone else stick out for you in this game before we move on to UCLA?
I think as much as we talk about Boswell, I think he still not to the part where we've expected him to be. I think he shot the ball
I
a little
agree.
bit better on Wednesday, but it's still I just think the biggest thing with Boswell is he needs to be more aggressive and try to score more in the paint.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Also, his shot just seems a little off. He normally is an above average 3-point shooter, hasn't shown that as of late. So yeah, I think when that's not clicking, that's making him not as aggressive, like you mentioned, not making
Definitely.
him, take more shots. And like I said, I think it's gonna take a while for these 3 guards, Boswell, Larson, Love, to be able to play. They have played together, earlier in the season on a long stretch, well together during games, but I think it's going to take more time in these conference games and these tough battles to kind of find their roles. But Caleb Love, he's not, as we know, he's not known to be a high percentage shooter, but he shows up every night. He's really
Yeah.
been elite, been one of the best guards in the Pac-12, if not the best. Had 20, as I mentioned, in this game. And it's great to have a guy that when you're down in games, like we'll get into in a couple of minutes against UCLA or even against USC, where it's a close game early on to break a game open. Caleb loves that guy. And he always shows up. He's always ready to play. But let's get into the best game of this week for Arizona. And it was, like I mentioned, it was in a tight battle and a battle that we didn't really expect. This UCLA team has been really bad, just to flat out and say it this season. They're 8-11. Arizona beat them by 6. Like I mentioned, they were down by almost 20. And I admit I thought this game was out of hand and was just it was out of reach for Arizona during the first part of the second half. But like I said, I mean the just the shot making and that level that Pelle Larsson was playing at in particular in that game, 22 points, 6 for 12 from the field. He was just elite, making big shots. Love made a big shot. They just when those guys are clicking and get going, Arizona's hard to beat, and they're hard to not just beat but put away. The reason
Completely true.
Arizona has a chance in games when they're down by 10, 15, 20 is because they have big time players and they have guys that can shoot them out of a hole in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was just talking about Boswell, and I think it's great you put specifically those three main guards in the same conversation, because I think the biggest thing that I noticed between the three guys is age. Age is the biggest thing. All three of them can shoot. All three of them can go get rebounds. All three of them can drive. All three of them can finish around the rim. But Pele and Love, when they know their shot's not falling, they're a little bit more aggressive in putting the ball on the floor and trying to get to the rim. And that's a part where I think Boswell is just young, and it's great to have those guys with him too, to be able to see that in live action. I'm just hoping he gets to a point where he's comfortable enough to go outside of his comfort level enough to be able to try to get points in any way he can. And yeah, but yeah, Pele's, we keep calling him this glue guy. He's just so much more to this team than just a glue guy.
That's the thing about Pelle Larsson is that he can be more on any night, but it's just
Yes,
kind of getting that out of him is kind of the tricky thing, and that it seems like yeah, it just seems like some nights he has that star power and some nights he doesn't. Some nights it's his night and some it just flat out isn't. But when he's on, he is fun to watch on both ends of the floor and really can fill up the stat sheet. But kind of getting back to Kylan Boswell, someone else that was more consistent earlier in the season, kind of dipped off a little bit. That's Keyshawn Johnson, one of the veterans on this
mm-hmm.
team. He was a guy that during the first about 8, 10 games, we talked about that this guy's good for 10, 15 every night. He was leading them in scoring on the season at one point during the first bunch of games there. But yeah, he only had 4 points, but he did have 5 rebounds, 3 assists. I think the thing is with expecting a lot of points every game from Johnson is that he gets his baskets in weird kind of ways. Like he's not an elite 3 point shooter. He was 0 for 2 in this game, and yeah, there are games where he hits 2 or 3, and that brings that total up a lot. But he's not a dominant low post threat.
Definitely.
He doesn't really have his game. Yeah, his game's just not well rounded enough on offense to me to expect the high scoring ability that we did see earlier in the season. But I think he's kind of matchup based on when he's going to perform at a high level on offense, at least. Because on defense, he always brings the toughness and energy.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think that just speaks to the fact of him being kind of a tweener with his size and the position that he plays. And this isn't a knock, but he's just doesn't have one aspect of his game that is just like amazing. Like
100%.
he's an okay shooter, he's an okay driver, he's okay, or he's a pretty good finisher. I'll give him that. He's a solid finisher around the rim. And we have seen him games where he's been able to even get to the free throw line around the rim. And I think that probably, I think, a lot more alludes to the fact of him not being able to produce 10, 15 a night, where some nights he's just going to have two. But I think probably how I feel about him so far is he's kind of come a little bit more to earth, I think, lately, of
I agree.
how I thought his role would be going into the year, of just making the non-stat plays, hustling, playing great defense, getting rebounds, boxing out so your other teammates can get the rebounds, preventing offensive rebounds and stuff like that. And I think he's probably been the more so a glue guy on this team right now than Pele is.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 each and every week of the college basketball season. We have a special offer that will be available starting on Tuesday, January 9th, and running through Monday, February 12th, the morning after Super Bowl 58. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, in honor of the big game, you can use the bonus code FIELD158 and you'll get $158 in free bets on your first wager with BetMGM, regardless of whether or not you win that first bet. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code FIELD158. Deposit at least $5 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive $158 in bonus bets, regardless of the outcome of your bet. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD158 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly, which happens quite a bit. When you cross state borders, you just log into your existing account and fire away. You don't have to create separate accounts in each state. It's easy, it's simple, it's clean. And most importantly, we have some fun stuff coming up for the heart of the college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odd boosts, and my favorite, a nice juicy parlay boost. So download the BetMGM app and sign up today. Field 158.
All right, moving on, Jordan. Let's get into the game that we saw as we're recording this last night, Thursday night. Arizona suffered their third straight loss on the road in the Pac-12 season so far. They lost 83-80 against Oregon State, and they were leading. Arizona was leading in this game by 12 in the first half. They unraveled in the second half, which is kind of what we always talk about. It's the opposite. They start off slow and they finish stronger. This was the opposite. Oregon State was just shooting the lights out of the ball. They made 12 threes, 60%. Jordan Pope looked like Steph Curry out there. And I'm starting to worry more and more about this team every time they lose on the road. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I would agree. I think still some of the tendencies are still very similar with kind of a majority of all these home losses that we've seen. They all happen the same way. The home team shoots an ungodly percentage from either three-point line or from the field, and they have one or two guys that just have almost career nights. They look unstoppable, and Arizona's backcourt like doesn't fully show up. I know early it seemed I felt like Caleb and Pele were pretty dang good early. They were both aggressive.
Right.
But the thing is Boswell. Boswell outside of a Duke game has done very little when he plays on the road. And that seems to really affect this team apparently. I know one of the
100%.
one of the other things is even down the stretch. I know they went over 2 minutes without scoring right after the 5 minute mark in the second half. You're not going to win many games, especially tight games, when you're going 2+ minutes without even scoring.
Yeah, yeah, it's unacceptable the performances that Boswell's putting out there. It's that simple. In the last couple of games, we've talked about it, just to reiterate it. He's had 0 points, two of the last four games. Obviously, a game against UCLA he had 3 points, and he's 1 for 9 shooting the last two games. And it's just, yeah, he's not turning the ball over a ton, which is great. But like last night against Oregon State, he's getting in foul trouble early. He's not staying on the court, and when he's on the court, he's not really affecting the game in a positive way. And Jordan, I was really during Kirk Crease's time as point guard of this Arizona team the last 2 years, I was really critical of him because he made a ton of mistakes. He turned the ball over a lot. He was a wild shooter and wasn't consistent. And so I gotta give the same to Kylan Boswell when he's not playing well. I get this is Boswell's first year, and I want to keep saying that this is his first year as a starter and first year getting major minutes because last year his minutes were scattered throughout the year. So, but while saying that, I also want to say the if you're the point guard of an Arizona team, you just have to be better. And if this team wants to get to where they want to get to, maybe a Final Four, an Elite Eight, a Sweet 16, hopefully all that stuff, Boswell is going to have to be better. And like you said, the other guys were pretty good in this game. Pelle Larsson, Caleb Love combined for 40. They shot the lights out of the ball. Arizona shot the ball over 52% from the field. They only made 3 3-pointers. That was atrocious, but they still had some very good production from their other guards. So Boswell really needs to pick up his end, like his slack, and he needs to just contribute more for this team to be successful.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's kind of almost just like every facet of his game. Like, I think it was the last road trip, he had a game where he didn't record a stat, and it was just like there was no way he was impacting the game. And we've had games over the last few years with Kerr Kriisa where he's not shooting, and it was offensively that was kind of his only tool, at least like scoring wise. The only thing he could do was shoot. He had probably maybe 3 or 4 drives for layups his entire career with Arizona. But outside of that, when he had nights when he didn't shoot, he was still like a facilitator in some way. He would still at least get a few assists,
Because he was
maybe
a
try
lot
to
more
bring up a
aggressive.
charge. For sure. And it's just mind blowing. And again, like I've said it in the last few weeks, like I think it just points to how young he is. Like he's just going through a really bad stretch, and he's not for surely figured out how to really break out of it. And to some of the teams they've played, credit, the teams have not been great, but the leading guards have played really well. Like Jordan Pope went crazy last night for Oregon. Or Oregon State. He had over 30 points. Like, we can't talk about like how bad Arizona is without talking about how well some of the teams that they've played against have played when they played them. And I know a few weeks ago, somebody, I think it was one of the Duke players, were talking about like, oh, like everybody's like okay, but the second we show up, it's like they play their hardest against us. And it's like, when you're the best in your conference, that's the way it is. That's just the way it is, you
Yep.
know? And that spans over multiple sports and over like multiple different conferences and universities. Arizona right now is still on a talent level, still leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else in the Pac-12. And wherever they're going to go, the team they're playing against is going to give them their best shot, because at least they have a chance to storm the court after a win.
Yeah, and that's because Arizona comes into these seasons, and this season in particular, of winning multiple Pac-12 championships and
Yep.
tournaments. And 2 years ago and going to the Sweet 16 last year didn't work out so well in the tournament. But yeah, I agree. More pressure comes when you're better. When you win, more success is expected. But like, yeah, so when more is expected, you have to perform well, and there's less room for error. And
Definitely.
I kind of like Arizona this year, I feel like just had so much success, like they have the past 3 years early in the season. And I kind of feel like they weren't tested enough in a lot of those games. The Duke game, they were, but like besides, like, not up until the Purdue game is when that stretch started, and that's when Arizona's been 5-6 since that Purdue game, which is just terrible.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in just a minute. A couple other things I wanted to touch on in this game is you mentioned the shot making has been unbelievable from an Oregon State, from an FAU in a couple of these losses, but also the defense and Arizona guarding the perimeter have been terrible in these games, and in particular against Oregon State. They were getting uncontested, like wide open 3-point shots. And also Jordan Pope, I remember one possession late in the second half. He I think he missed the layup, got the rebound, and then like dribbled it back out, or he went out to the perimeter and he got the ball back and hit a three. It's like it just seems like these other teams want it more. And when you want to be the best team in the Pac-12 in a conference, you always have to want it more. And it
Mhm.
just seems like this team is just this Arizona team wavers too much with their energy and effort level. And I've said it and I've harped on it this entire season, because even in their wins, they've been frustrating during parts of those games. They still just they just can't put it all together. Up until this point, they just haven't had a game in a long time where they all put it together and everybody is just playing good basketball. And I think that's a test to younger players stepping up into bigger roles like Kylan Boswell, and also all of these players playing very little with each other heading into this season.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with a lot of the things you said, and I think from my perspective, I think a lot of it, and I keep talking about it, is just the energy and the momentum that this team needs to show up for games is just it just is more daunting with every road loss, especially this one. Like before last night, Oregon State was dead last and had the sole spot of dead last in the conference, and like if you watch a broadcast, the gym is less than halfway full. I still don't understand how they had that many students to even storm. They just showed up out of nowhere, probably during the game. And like, oh my gosh, we're only losing by 10 to Arizona. We could
Yeah.
have a shot. And maybe they showed up, but it's just very frustrating, especially when we go to Duke and that's such a big game and in that environment and this team plays top to the top of their ability. We like that was basically their peak so far this year that we've seen. Like you still think it was their best one so far. And it's just hard. And I know one thing to kind of maybe possibly to look at still, like I always try to be the glass half full kind of guy, is there's still over a month left to right the ship and to be playing your best ball by the time the tournament starts.
Yeah.
And unless if something catastrophic happens, like this team is still gonna get an automatic bid, I think.
100%. Not a
And
doubt.
that
Not a doubt.
yeah. And so there's still a lot of hope for this team. And who knows, maybe that's something they need too. Maybe they need to be a 7 or a 6 seed to play somebody that's really good in the second and third round, or maybe even the first round. Just have one of those crazy matchups. Like every March, everybody talks about the 5 and the 12 matchup. How the 12 seems to win at least two times every single year, because
Mhm.
usually the 12 seeds are usually the guys that are really underseeded really badly. And so maybe that's something this team needs, is a scare from a good team and to play some really good competition early in the tournament, and to maybe even have a chance to be able to get some motivation. I still I'm just thankful that all March Madness games are neutral site games and not true road games. I think that's the best perspective that I feel like I can have for this team right now.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I haven't given up all hope for this season, although it seems bleak right now. And I
Yes,
still believe in Caleb Love in the long term, or not Caleb Love, Kylan Boswell, I meant to say there. I believe
agreed.
in Caleb Love too. But yeah, I still believe Boswell will figure it out by the end of this season. And if he comes back, I do think he will be a great point guard for Arizona in the future. But just
Agreed.
in the current state, this Arizona team to me is just they're an average team. They're right now. I'm not saying, like I said, I think they can be a great team when the season's over. Seems like we agree on that. But right now, this team is average. They're 5-6, like I said, in their last 11 games. They're 5-3 in the Pac-12 in a conference when it's one of, like we said, still one of the worst conferences in basketball. They're losing to not just better and winning teams in the conference. They're losing to Stanford. They're losing to Oregon State, like the worst teams in the conference, which is very concerning. And it's just, yeah, I think this team has a far way to go. And I still think I believe in Tommy to get the job done and to get this group together. But right now, there's just so many question marks that my belief is continuing to kind of get smaller every single game, because it seems like every game they don't correct the things that we saw last game. And the games are only going to get tougher. More stakes are going to be on the line. Teams are going to need a win more to try to get an automatic bid or try to boost their March Madness stock as we get later in the season. And do you have any other thoughts before we get into the Oregon game that's taking place Saturday afternoon?
I would just say I agree with your point on we're not seeing quick fixes or at least somewhat subtle adjustments, and I think that's the next option I feel like this team has. Like I know against UCLA this past Saturday, they rolled out Bradley in the second half to start over Boswell, and maybe this is starting to get to the time, at least on the road games, where you start to look and maybe start him even instead of Boswell, at least on the road. I don't know what that would really look like. Different
Yeah.
starters on road games versus home games, but it's an interesting thought.
No, yeah, it is. And it's good that this is happening earlier than later, as we know. So hopefully, unlike past years, they lose a bunch in the early middle of the season, and then they win more later rather than losing early when it really matters. Um, but on that note, we're gonna move on and we're gonna get right into the game on Saturday afternoon against Oregon. But the better games on Saturday, it's on the East Coast, it's 5:30 tip-off. It's on Fox, so a national television game, 3:30 tip-off in Tucson. And this is an Oregon Ducks team that's playing a little better than I originally thought. They are tied with Arizona at 5-2 at the top of the Pac-12, and they have some veterans. They got Jermaine Couisnard, their lead guard. He's been really good, over 14 a game, 5 rebounds, shooting at almost 40%. And they don't shoot it that well. They only shoot it a little over 37%, and they only score a little over 78 points per game. So they're to me, struggle to keep up with Arizona. But Jordan, as we know in past games in this matchup, Arizona and Oregon, when they go to Oregon, that crowd, that environment, that court, it's a weird one, but the crowd is always crazy.
Yeah, you said it. I think the court's probably a bigger thing than most of just how funky it looks. I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
I don't either,
What do
actually.
you?
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
think it's
kind of
cool.
cool. It's
Yep.
different. It's Oregon to me, to be honest. It
Yeah, I
just
like
needs a bigger Nike logo on the
yeah, I
court, I
like
feel like.
I like weird courts because most of the courts nowadays look semi, the same. So it's cool to see, turn on your TV, see a different, unique court. And like you said, when you see that, you turn on the TV, you don't know who's playing, you turn that on, it's
True.
Oregon.
Very true.
How do you see this
But
one playing out?
historically, Arizona has struggled up there. I can even remember back to DeAndre Ayton days. I think we got upset up there, and I think we were top 5 at that point, and that was a crazy game. But Oregon's coming off a rough road trip around the Four Corners. They lost at Utah. They lost at Colorado. I think it'll be a really close game. I think it will be, and like you said, like that's the pro team around there. Like that's really all there is to do in Eugene is to go to Oregon games, and Dana's a great coach, and that freshman class has been really solid for him this year, and he's done such a good job of just roster turnover over the years of picking and plugging in transfers whenever he needs to, and his development is very
Mhm.
underrated. I feel like his development's super underrated,
Great coach. Great
and
coach.
and his ability to just kind of mesh it all together has led him to some awesome success. He had a Final Four run in the last 10 years, and yeah, I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll probably be within 5 points, and I think Oregon actually will upset them.
Wow. I just looked it up, Jordan. Arizona hasn't won a game in Eugene, Oregon since 2014-15 season. Six game losing streak in Eugene. Pretty crazy. I know they haven't had much success there as of late, but I didn't think it was like that. And Arizona in general, they've won 2 out of 3, but before that, they lost 7 straight overall against Oregon. So they
Yeah,
haven't had a ton of success. They've had some recently, but even last year, they lost by 19 points in Oregon. And I remember
yeah.
last year, I thought Arizona was the better team too. So, yeah, I think it's so hard for me to pick this game because like you said, I do think it's going to be a close game. I think it will be closer, but I think I don't know. actually Arizona coming back and winning that game against UCLA, that has made me a little more confident when Arizona gets
Mm.
down and gets in these closer games, especially against these storied programs, because I think that, yeah, I agree this one will be close like last week's against UCLA, but I think Arizona's going to pull it out. I think they need to get a real kind of, good win on the road. And I think this could be their first chance that, because obviously they won at Cal, but Cal's Cal. So, yeah, they gotta get a big win in, and I think this is it. But do you have any other final thoughts before we go today?
Yeah, and I would say probably the thing that tips in Arizona scale is their ability to play in front of crowds, and Oregon isn't a pushover. Like their fan they show up for games. Like their fans are good. So hopefully hopefully Oregon goes a little bit over the top and boos the crap out of Caleb Love, and he just goes nuclear again like he did at Duke. And so that I think that's a thing that plays into it for them. And like going back to what you said about the UCLA game, I feel like McHale was a big reason for that comeback. And I feel like still I'm very questionable how this team can play when they have momentum versus when nobody's in the gym. How's the crowd reacting? Like this team is still, I probably emotional is probably a better word. This team is just very emotional, and when there's no emotion, that they just don't know what to do at times.
Yeah, I agree. This is one of the biggest tests and road tests for this Arizona team this year. I think we'll learn a lot in these next two games if Arizona is a legit Final Four team this season. But that's all we have time for today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, for watching, viewing, liking, and subscribing. Please follow us on X at Bear Down AZ Pod. Follow the